Before we start this video, a large thank you to Jupta, Joel, and Lewis for their support on Patreon. I hope you guys enjoy the video. And, as always, an immense thank you to Halo Burner for their continued and immense support to the channel this month on Patreon. You are a legend, sir, and I hope you enjoy the video. Hello guys, how's it going? Today we're going to continue the build-up system, and we're going to make some UI. We're going to make it so we can tick down any build-ups we have, so basically degrade them over time. Alright, so I am in the character effects manager, but I'm actually going to jump over to the player UI prefab. And the reason we're going to do this is because we're going to make a build-up bar, and we'll start with poison. So I did not make a prefab for my health bar, which is definitely a cardinal sin because we reuse it for the stamina and the mana bar, focus points bar. I should have done that, so I'm not going to make that mistake again. I'm going to copy this health bar here, duplicate it rather, and put it down here in the pop-up organizer, and I'm going to make it into prefab momentarily. Now, you could put this in the HUD manager. There's an argument for that. Why am I putting it in the pop-up manager? Well, it pops up and then goes away. It is still technically a part of your HUD. However, if I put it in this organizer here, if we get a pop-up message or other stat bars, this will vertically stack them and kind of auto sort them for us. So I'm choosing to put it here. Elden Ring puts it in the middle of the screen too, I believe, down kind of like on top of the player. And this is good because if we have like 4 or 5 at the same time, then basically we can just make sure they're going to stack on top of each other using this organizer. Okay, so I've added a script called UI buildup bar to this. So I'm going to delete the start and update function, drop in my namespace as is per tradition. So again, I added this to the copy of the health bar I made and called it poison bar. And now I'm going to make this derived from UI stat bar. I'm just going to check on that to make sure that it contains everything we need, but I'm 99% sure it does. So if I go here, yes, we have a way to set the max value and a way to set the stat, and that's pretty much all we need. And you can keep the functionality too if you want to scale the bar, but we don't need to do that, so we're going to disable it by default. But this is going to behave very similar to how the health bar behaves, just a little bit different. So we have our build-up type here. Let's go ahead and use that enum on this build-up bar. So I'm going to make a public build-up. We're going to say build-up type, and obviously this is going to be poison. We'll do poison first. And I'm going to go back into the player UI prefab here, and I'm going to change the fill color to green. We'll say green this time. I'm going to use purple and Nephilim. Alright, looks good. Now I am going to go down here, make sure this is on poison. It is, very good. And now let's make it into a prefab before I forget. This was something I was very guilty of in some projects not too long ago. I would never make prefabs of things. I realized how important that is as time passed when doing a lot of UI development. Make prefabs of everything. You'll thank yourself later. Or don't, like I did, and don't listen and just wish you made prefabs. So let's go to the HUD manager here. And I am going to make a header for build-up bars. And then I am going to make a serializable field for UI build-up bar. And I'm going to call this poison bar. Now, there's so many ways we can update this. You could do an on-value change, you could do the start of an effect, the end of an effect. It doesn't really matter. I'll go through a couple, and you can kind of pick whatever you want to, or maybe you have a very specific way you want to do it for certain reasons. But the first way you can do this is to make a function called set buildup amount and make it require a buildup like this, and do a switch statement and go through each of your bars and set it depending on the type. So you will call this when a defect or a buildup effect degrades, or when you add one to, or a new set of build-up to a character. But you'd have to call it when it degrades too, because basically anytime it changes, you want to call this. So this is perfectly acceptable, and this is the way that I'm sure you do it if you didn't have netcode for game objects or it was a single player project. So let's go back to take build-up effect. You can see here we still do a couple things where we come back here. So we have no way right now to actually degrade any build-up that's on our character. And we have no limit, right? No way to calculate what the limit is for the build-up until we apply the status effect. So let's deal with the limit situation here, and I'm going to make this very straightforward. I think Elden Ring calculates this in a few ways. It's called robustness, I believe, but we're just going to make it calculate based off of our vigor. I think primarily it's off of vigor in Elden Ring too. So we're going to make a new float variable for build-up capacity, and if you want to make them all individually get their own capacities, which is what I do, that's cool, go for it. But we're going to give them all one same capacity. So basically, if your poison build capacity is 150, so is your bleed buildup. And we're going to make it all scale off of our vigor level. So you can see here, if we go and look for our max health, we can find where we actually calculate that. So let's just find all references. And we can calculate that on, oh, I just missed it. calculate health based on vitality level. All right, let's go there. So that's in the player stats manager, and it's probably on the character stats manager because every character is going to use that, and yes, it is. So let's just copy one of these here now, and we can make it do the exact same thing, but we're going to calculate our build-up capacity. Another side note too, if you're doing a game with a lot of effects and calculations, like I am in Nephilim, I actually made a thing called the World Formula Manager, and I put everything there from skills and ability and stat calculations, but if you're just having a few like Elden Ring, then it doesn't hurt to keep them on the character stat manager. So let's do a calculate build-up capacity based on vitality level, and we'll return the capacity. And I'm just going to say you get, we'll say 3.25 points for every point of vitality for your capacity. And again, I'm just picking a random number out of the air. There's no reason I really did this. I'm not really going to go in depth on a calculation. This is kind of things you have to attune for based on how you want your game to feel. So next we can find where we call this, and we call here on load game data from current character data. So let's add that there. We're going to say player network manager dot build capacity. We're going to say dot value is equal to calculate build up capacity based on vitality level. And I'm just going to basically copy the end of calculate health based on vitality and just copy the variable and pass the vigor here. I keep calling it vitality, but it's named vigor. Crossing my projects again. So over here, we have set new max health value on the player network manager. This is called whenever your health value changes, your max health value. Let's copy this whole function and make another one. And again, this is going to be called on value changed. Let's call this set new max build-up capacity value, and we're going to need to pass our vigor / vitality level again. And then what we're going to do is calculate our max build-up capacity value by equating it to the new function we just made. So instead of max health, it's going to be, whoops, I just changed that. It's not supposed to be old capacity, new capacity. I'll change that back in a second. Instead of max health here, we're going to put in our build-up capacity value. It's going to be equal to player stats manager calculate build-up capacity based on vitality level. So then we're going to pass, again, our new vitality that I just accidentally changed the name of. I'm going to change that back really fast. And what we're going to do is we're not going to need to set any current value because there is no current value. There is only just the cap. But we still need to update our UI HUD manager. So let's paste that here. And now we're going to say set max build-up capacity. And we don't have this as a function yet. So go over to your player UI HUD manager. Make sure you pass the build-up capacity.value to this. And then we're going to do this. Now, if you had individual build-up bars with their individual capacities, you're going to make several functions or do this a bit of a different way. But since we're all going to keep the same capacity for all of them, I believe Elden Ring does that as well, we are going to just call this in one function and basically reference all the stat bars that we have and update them. So over on the player UI HUD manager, we have, let's just copy one of these, set max health value. And I'm just going to paste that probably above or below, let's do above the regular stat bars because we have the build-up amount up here, so I'll put it next to that. So set max build-up value, very good. And then we're going to make this require an int. We're going to change the name of this to build-up capacity. And now, instead of referencing the health bar, obviously you want to reference all of your build-up bars and pass this new value accordingly. So in case you're lost so far, basically every time we change our health level, we're updating our max capacity. And then we change our max capacity, we're making that reflect on the bars that we have in our HUD manager. But we're not actually calling, why is this giving me grief? Set max build-up capacity. Did I type that wrong? Set max build-up value, I did. And this should be rounded, so let's do a mathf.round to int. All right, so we're not actually calling this yet though on our on network spawn or despawn. We're not syncing it to the on value changed event. So let's go ahead and do that. And again, if you're lost, you can right click on any of these other set values and see where we're calling them from. And we're just going to basically do the same thing with this value. So let's copy the name of this value really quick. Let's right click set new max health. You can see we're calling it from two important places here. We're subscribing to the event on network spawner for the owner. So let's do the same thing. And then we need to unsubscribe from it, of course. So I'm going to make a comment here because we have a nice comment above saying update the total amount of health or stamina when your stat is linked to either changes. And we're going to say here update the total amount of build-up we can endure based on our vitality level. We're going to say player network manager dot vigor on value changed. I still keep calling it vitality. Plus equals player network manager set new max build-up capacity value. So let's go down here and I'm going to unsubscribe the event. So just copy and paste it, change the plus to a minus, and we're good. So basically, every single time now that you're bigger changes, it's going to do 2 events. It's going to calculate your new max health pool, and it's also going to calculate your max buildup capacity. And this will be the capacity before you're affected by the buildup effect. All right, so down here, I'm going to make a comment, update the build UI bars when buildup changes. So this is one of 2 ways you can do this, as I said earlier in the video. You could say player network manager dot poison buildup value dot on value change plus equals, and we could call a function that we don't have made yet, because you can see we can't call our other function because it requires things that we can't use on this event. So for this event to work, you need 2 values that are linked up with the on value changed in or float, depending on the variable type. We can't do that. As you can see, it's going to give us some grief. So this other function you have to call on the end or start of an effect, but we can make a new one for each of the effects. So I'm just going to copy this. Set buildup amount will become set poison buildup amount. And then instead of passing a buildup type, you're going to pass an int for old amount and int and new amount. Or it might be a float actually. Yes, it is a float. My bad. It's going to be a float because the variable type is float. So I'm actually going to say set new poison buildup too, just so the naming conventions look the same. And I'm going to make this require a float. So again, there's no at least in this situation where I can see, no massive pro or con to doing either or. It just depends on the way you want to do it. I'm sure in certain situations you want to use one or the other. The downside of this obviously is you need to make multiple functions for this for each buildup bar if you're going to do the subscribe way. But the plus side is it's going to change every single time your network variable changes. So there's pros and cons to either, depending on what you want to do. So I'm just going to copy this here now, and I'm going to unsubscribe down here. So the other way, like I said, if you want to use the first function we made, you want to call that on an effect whenever you're adding or subtracting a buildup amount. So set buildup amount, this one is called on an effect, and the other one is called on a network event. So back over here on take buildup effect, we have no way of knowing if the character is poisoned. Now we have a way to check for the timed effect. So let's go over to the player UI HUD manager here. And let's make a comment here for option 1 and option 2, just so this is very clear. So you can call this function add a process of a timed effect. You can call this function on value changed. So the first one, every time you degrade a buildup, call it. The second one is called automatically for you, just so we're very clear. Now go back into the player UI, untick scale bar with length unless you want to. I don't think you want to do that. Let's go over to create a new folder in our scripts and effects. I'll make one for timed. I'm just going to organize this a bit because it's been a long time here. Static, I think we have instant as well. So, and base class, forgot about that. I'm going to drag all of these scripts into their appropriate folders just so we're keeping this a bit more neat. And at first glance, we can probably see things easier. It'll also get more hectic, obviously, if you're adding more effects. I have like 300 or something in Nephilim, so the organization really helps. Instant, and I'm just going to quickly drag all these in, and then through the magic of editing, I'm going to pop back in a sec. Okay, there we go. Oh, forgot to end. All right, so inside our timed folder, let's make our first actual timed effect that's not the base class. And I'm going to call this buildup effect. And not to be confused with take buildup, because take buildup just adds it instantly. The buildup effect is going to kind of degrade it over time after it's been added to you. So if you want to change the name, if that's a bit confusing to you, you call one take buildup and one degrade buildup. That's all well and good too. But this one is a timed effect. The other one is an instant effect. So one adds instantly, and again, one degrades over time. So let's make a create asset menu. Obviously delete the start and update functionality, dropping your namespace as is per tradition. Make this derived from timed effect. And my create asset menu is going to be create character effects / timed effects / buildup effect. And I'm going to override everything, and I'm going to make a header for the type of buildup which we're going to need. So let's say public buildup. I'm going to call this buildup type, and then make a header for the degradation. And then we're going to have basically how much it degrades over time, like by what factor, and then how much is left. So public int buildup amount degradation, defaultly -1 is what I'm going to have mine at. If you want to run faster, or you could tie it to some variable on your network manager that makes some buildups degrade faster, that could be pretty cool. You could get items that affect that or whatever. Lots of ways to kind of modify this. So let's override process effect, let's override remove effect. And let's make a private void degrade buildups. So the only 2 variables here are the buildup amount, degradation, and remaining is what we're going to kind of go through. We're going to increment the buildup remaining by the degradation every time we process it, and then if the buildup remaining reaches 0 or its max, we remove the effect. And we need the buildup type variable up there for another function we're going to make to simplify this process. So first off, if we're not the owner, simply return. If the buildup remaining is less than 0 or it's greater or equal to your buildup capacity, we can do that by saying character.characterStatsManager dot, and then we can get the, or is it calculate buildup capacity based on vitality level. We pass the character, and then we're going to pass the character network manager, I keep calling it vitality, dot vigor dot value. And then if it's either 0 or it's greater than our capacity, we're going to remove this effect. Why are we doing that? Well, if it reaches 0, we're no longer affected. If it reaches the max capacity, something new is going to happen, depending on the type. Regardless, we don't need this anymore because our buildup will be reset when either the effect happens or we reach 0. So I'm going to make a comment so this is very clear. If the buildup fades out or reaches its climax, remove the timed effect. All right, pretty straightforward. Now, once you get past that, degrade the buildup past the character. Now, under degrade buildup, we're going to say character.characterStatsManager.degrade buildups. And now, there's no function that has this yet, but we're going to make it require our buildup type. We're going to make it require our buildup degradation, and we're going to make it require the effect as well, as in this effect itself. And now, let's go over to the character stats manager and write that function. It's going to be very simple, and I think it will make all this make sense if it doesn't already, if you don't know where I'm going. So let's go to the script here, make a public virtual void, degrade buildups. And what we're going to do is make it require, like I said, a buildup type. We're going to make it require an int for the amount, and we're going to make it require a buildup effect for the effect. Now we can use our handy dandy switch statement to go through these. If you have multiple, let's pass the buildup. And right now we're only going to work on poison because that's all we're kind of leaning into. We'll do bleed after poison. Character network manager dot poison buildup dot value plus equals the amount. So you could add or subtract effects this way if you want to do. If you want to do an overtime effect that adds buildups, like if you're standing in a poison pool, you can do it the same way. So effect.buildup remaining equals character.characterNetworkManager.poisonBuildup.value. Okay, let's go over now, and if you come down, we can see we can do number 2 here. We can check for a timed buildup effect of type. So let's make a local variable called buildup effect. Let's call that poison buildup. Let's say it's equal to the character.characterEffectsManager.check for time effect. And now we're going to pass a variable that we don't have yet. We're going to make a variable on the world character effects manager for the poison degradation. And I see here now as I'm typing this out, I have a bit of a naming issue that I don't like, so I'm going to change it. Because the name poison buildup effect, I don't like, because this is for taking a buildup effect instantly, but it's too close to the actual buildup effect that we're going to use to degrade it over time. Whoops, didn't mean to take a screenshot. So let's go over to that variable here now, and I'm going to rename it. So I'm going to rename this from poison and bleed buildup effect to take poison and take bleed buildup effect. Again, just so we're clear, if you get slashed by a sword that has poison buildup, it's going to add one of these effects to you and give you some of that instantly. Then, if you have any buildup, a degradation buildup will appear on your character as a timed effect, and will subtract it over time until it reaches 0. So let's make another header for degrade buildups, and I've changed the first header up there to take buildups from buildups, just again so it's very clear at first glance. And now I'm going to add a buildup effect under here for degrade poison buildup effect. Honestly, if you wanted to, you could even rename the class from buildup effect to degrade buildup effect, entirely up to you. I'm going to keep it the same as it is. So now I'm going to reference that variable for degrade poison buildup effect. I'm going to pass the effect ID like so. Why is it giving me grief? Because I didn't cast it. Let's cast that as a buildup effect because not all timed effects are buildup effects, but all buildup effects are timed effects. Now under here, number 3, we're going to say if that variable does equal null, well, we have to create one because the character needs some way of knowing how much buildup they have and also degrading it over time. So we're going to say poison buildup is equal to instantiate, always instantiate, remember that. We're going to instantiate a copy of our effect here, and we're going to say character.characterEffectsManager. Then we're going to say add timed effect, and we're going to pass our newly created poison buildup effect. And we're also going to say poison buildup dot process effect to process the first tick instantly. Okay, we can pass our character. Cool. Now, If the character is over the limit, apply the effect of poison. We're not going to do that just yet. Let's go to data and let's go to our effects. Let's create a new folder for timed effects and let's make this effect. We want to now make sure that upon adding a buildup, this effect is created and we subtract it over time. We just want to make sure everything's working. We want to see that nice UI bar pop up. We want to make sure that everything is in its place. So let's go ahead now and go to the poison buildup degradation effect, like so. And let's go over here and go to the World Character Effects Manager and drag in this newly created effect. By the way, a nice little fun thing for you to do right now, you should pause the video and do the same thing with bleed or any of your other status effects and test it in the game to see if it works. So if you want to do that right now, pause the video, go ahead, be a great time to do that. Now I'm going to go into the Player UI Manager, drag in my poison buildup bar, because I forgot. And I'm going to go over to the UI stat bar, and we're going to make a override call on set max stat and set new stat. And if you pause the video and try this, you might have encountered this, you might have fixed it, you might have not. What we don't want to do is set the max value or the current value to the max value, because that would be bad. We want to keep it whatever it is. And also, we want to hide this bar when the value is 0. So under set stat, we're going to say if the new value is less than or equal to 0, the game object should be set active to false. But we want an else statement, because otherwise, if it is greater than 0, we want to set it to true. I don't think you want the build-up bars on your screen all the time. They look a little bit intrusive. Wouldn't be very fun. So let's go back here and set the value of the slider to 0 by default. You don't want it on 1 either when you start. And let's save that in the prefab. Let's leave the player UI. Let's come back here and let's also copy this and put it on where we set our max stat. And you know what? I'm not going to call a new value. I'm just going to reference the slider.value and I'm going to keep that the same down here. It doesn't make a difference, but I want to keep the naming conventions the same here. Let's save that, and now under process timed effects, oh, I'm actually not calling this, am I? No, I am not. Okay, well, definitely a very fun challenge for people who paused the video and tried it. Let's make an update function, and then let's actually go up here and serialize the field for float. Protected float, and you can do this 2 ways. You can make effect tick timer, and you can say 1 and then count it down every time it reaches 0, put it back to 1. But magic numbers are bad, so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to say effect tick timer, and we're going to say minus equals dot delta time, not plus equals. I'm going to change that in a sec. Then we're going to say effect tick timer if it's less than or equal to a certain value. So let's change this to minus time dot delta time. Let's change this to less than or equal to, and then we can make it less than or equal to 0. So we're going to make a second variable now for the default time before it ticks. So you call this effect tick time, but that might confuse some people. So we're going to call it default effect tick time. So basically, if the timer is less than or equal to 0, put it back to the default time between ticks, and then process every single timed effect that you have one time. So for example, if you want this to happen once every second, you make the default effect tick time 1 second. All right, let's save that. Now, if I go into the game here and add a poison buildup, ooh, it is not ticking down. What did I forget? Okay, I'll be right back. 1 sec. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, so I am a fool and forgot that I'm actually using a debug update function on the player to add those instantly. So I'm going to make this a virtual void on the character effects manager, like so. And I'm going to go to my players update functionality on the character effects manager or player effects manager. I'm going to call override void update and call base update. So it calls the logic on the base class, and we can still use our debug logic to add the effect instantly. All right, now I will save that and go back into the game. That should be good. So now here I am, and if I add the poison buildup, you can see, yes, it does decrease over time. Very cool. So basically, you can see the tick timer going down as well. Every time it hits 0, it processes the timed effect, which in turn degrades the buildup effect. All right, cool. So if I click on the poison buildup, you can see the buildup over time, 7, 6, 5. Very cool, working as intended. So let's just make sure I can add a couple and make sure it disappears when it goes to 0. Yes, it does. It does in fact disappear. What if I add it twice? Does it pop up? So there's 1 and there's 2, and it does. Okay. Thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you learned something new. So in the next video, we're actually going to get to what happens when the effect climaxes, and that will create a new effect called poisoned, which again is a timed effect. and will drain your character's health over time. If we have time in that video as well, we're also going to do the whole series for Bleed. Bleed will add an instant effect that I believe is called Hemorrhage in Elden Ring, where you lose a lot of life over time depending on your max life value. I hope you all have a very lovely weekend. If you didn't see the announcement, by the way, in the Discord, Nephilim is at a point now where I can confidently say it is stable. And when I say stable, I mean from at least 25 to 30 hours of playtests over the course of the last couple weeks. There seems to be no more game-breaking bugs that will kind of deter you from doing anything or having to reset. Now, I could stand to be proven wrong, so if you guys find anything, want to report in the Discord, very cool. Thank you to everyone who's taken the time to try that demo, by the way. You have my sincerest appreciation. As a solo engineer working on that, I could not get it done at the speed I do without the help from everybody that I get, so thank you for that. Thank you to my patrons. It is because of all of you lovely individuals this series can continue at all, and I get to work on my project, so you have my sincerest thanks. I'm yammering at this point, so I will see you guys next week. Have a great weekend.